Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and a lot of you really enjoyed the Outlaw guide thing for Prepatch, so I want to make one for Subtlety. This isn't a full guide because we still don't have artifact weapon or PvP talents. We don't have everything because the game is balanced to, again, level 110. But I do want to get you guys playing Subtlety and maybe offer you guys some tips, some different builds, how I play, and how I'm able to get the numbers I'm getting in PGs, and help you guys get the same numbers for yourselves. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video, hopefully you find it useful. Let's get to it. I'm gonna do it in the same style that I did for Outlaw Rogue, but of course this is gonna be a bit more polished because I know kind of how I want the video to go. I'm gonna talk about stats, talents, changes to Subtlety, like all the major changes for abilities, as well as your rotation. And rotation, again, is going to be put in quotes because Subtlety, like Outlaw, is very situational based on like how you want to play and what you want to do. But I'll give you guys like a situation, the hypothetical PvP situation of how it would be played. Stats wise, what we learned from last video of Outlaw Guide, I'll have that in the description by the way. Stats don't actually change while you're in PvP. The only thing that does change slightly is depends on how much gear you have. If you have under 700 item level, then your gear is going to be kind of like a bit lower in agility, stamina, but not that much to make a difference. But anything over item level 700 works for PvP and does adjust your stats slightly, but not by much. If you are getting gear though, gear with mastery and versatility and crit are direct increases to damage. In terms of talents, the build that I've been running for Subtlety is a modified version of a sustain build that me and Senses were able to play together before. This is actually a build made by Nahj, who's like a multi-glad rank 1 rogue, plays Subtlety, play through all WoD. It's a modification for this build mainly because we don't have PvP talents, so I kind of got to modify one talent option for less damage but more sustain. It makes sense, but this is the build that I've been running and it's very effective, especially after the damage changes that happened to Subtlety. Let's go over the build. At level 15, we have Master of Subtlety, Weapon Master, and Gloomblade. Master of Subtlety is something you guys have known for the longest time. It can be used with Shadow Dance. I feel like that's enough to say that, hey, 10% increased damage while Shadow Dance is available, sign me up for that. Weapon Master is basically multi-strike, without like, multi-strike being like 30% of the damage that you dealt, is like now 100% of the damage that you used to deal. So all of your abilities have a 6% chance to hit the target twice. So like say you hit for 50 with Eviscerate, it'll hit for 50 twice, so like 100 damage. But only 6% chance. Because of the 6% chance, which is very unlikely, I just don't roll with it. Then we have Gloomblade, which basically replaces Backstab, increases the damage of Backstab a little bit, and makes it full shadow damage, so it goes through armor. Backstab is useless, 6% is not that great, so Massive Subtlety is the way to go. Level 30 you have Night Stalker, Subterfuge, and Shadow Focus. I like Shadow Focus, but 20% less energy is not enough for me to go for. Instead, I'm going for Subterfuge. I'm not really going for your abilities requiring stealth can be used for 3 seconds after stealth, although that is very convenient in the opener, but also increases the duration of Shadow Dance by 2 seconds. You're going to want to use Shadow Dance for as long as possible, and the more use you have out of Shadow Dance, the longer you have it available, the better you deal as a Subtlety rogue, at least with this build. So that's what we went for Subterfuge. I guess you can go Night Stalker for more of a burstier buff kind of damage, but Subterfuge is the way to go for me for the sustain build. Level 45, it's a question of Deeper Stratagem versus Vigor. Deeper Stratagem is better for burst, and Vigor is better for sustain, because you have extra energy, so more spams of abilities. You have better energy regen, so a little bit easier to manage energy. At level 60, it's a choice between Elusiveness or Soothing Darkness, which are great choices. Elusiveness is same. Feint reduces all damage you take from non-AoEs by 30%, so great in arenas. And then Soothing Darkness is really cool. You heal for 3% of your maximum life every 1 second while stealth is active. It's just very strong. It also works when your Shadow Dance is available, so when you're in battle and using Shadow Dance and you need a bit of healing, during Shadow Dance you also get healed for 3% every 1 second. Although once you enter BGs it's probably not exactly 3% because of like numbers and balancing, and balancing like things to that much of detail. But it still is a really good heal overall. I never complained about it. It's always been great. Level 75. It's a choice of Strike from Shadows, Tangle Shadows, or Parry in the Weak. Tangle Shadows increases the movement speed reduction of Nightblade. It's okay, not that much, well, not that great for PvP. Strike from Shadows could be great for maybe RBGs when you want to slow the whole team down, so you daze the players every time you use Shadow Strike. But Parry in the Weak is a direct damage increase. As Subtlety, you still do lineups with like stun locks and everything, so the 10% damage increase from stun locks is always beneficial. Level 90 is a really interesting option, and I'm gonna be much more in depth variation once you hit level 110, but currently at level 100 pre-patch, I feel like pre-med is the best. Cheap Shot and Shadow Strike generate 1 additional combo point. That's it. So a little bit easier to manage combo points left and right. In 2 Shadow Strikes, which is the ambush replace, or a Cheap Shot Shadow Strike, you have 5 combo points. Alacrity is good, but it's just so passive, and haste isn't really a stat that Subtlety I feel like can fully explore. Maybe like it's okay. It's like haste and getting maybe like 20% increased haste is great in the long run, but it's more of I feel like a PvE rather than a PvP talent option. Then we have Envelop in Shadows. It's basically like invest combo points to gain more combo points back over time. It's cool. It's just like it's just much easier to go with pre-med because you're really trying to get combo points, you know. I guess Envelop in Shadows is for somebody who really likes the in-depth combo point management. Level 100, it's actually a really good choice. I like the level 100 talent tree. Master of Shadows, you immediately gain 30 energy when you enter stealth or activate Shadow Dance. With this build, you spam a lot of abilities, so you are going to be low on energy, so getting 30 energy each time you have Shadow Dance available is so beneficial. It means more energy spam with also Vigor, getting a bit of energy regen back. Very useful. Mark for Death, of course, is an infinite, just one of the best abilities ever, but Master of Shadows is competitive to Mark for Death now. Death from Above is still good, but for PvP, it doesn't make your Eviscerate deal 50% more damage, they toned it down to like 25% more. Eviscerates don't really hit that hard for Subtlety. There's going to be a lot of things I'll tell you that you'll be surprised about, but yeah, Subtlety's Eviscerates are not the strongest Eviscerates I've seen ever. They're still beefy, but there's some other forms of damage that are much better than Eviscerate. So DFA isn't that great, but they did reduce its cost to down to 25 energy, so it is very nice. But Master Shadows is basically going to be the build that I'm running. Now for the big changes of Subtlety Rogue abilities. Backstab, useless. I found Backstab kind of useless in WoD. It's pretty bad. I'll explain how I use Backstab in Legion right now, but I don't like it. Crimson Vial, drink an alchemical concoction, 30-second cooldown, 30 energy, heals you over time. Very nice. Eviscerates, the deal still okay damage, especially at 5 combo points, but nothing less than that, so just watch out for that. Nightblade replaces your Rupture. Now at Subtlety, you're like a ninja that deals shadow damage and has like high affinity for shadow spells. Very cool stuff, and the better your Nightblade is, the more damage you deal. So Nightblade 5 combo points is 98k damage over 16 seconds, while Eviscerate is an instant 65. Getting Nightblade early is very helpful as a Subtlety Rogue. You still have Kidney Shot, you still have Kick, all these abilities are fine, 20-second cooldown, works just as it used to. You have Shadowblade, so hey, Pandaria, you have Shadowblades back, and it basically does the same exact thing. Your auto attacks deal extra shadow damage, and all abilities that generate combo points generate 1 additional combo point. So lots of combo points being thrown around here. Shadow Dance is completely revamped. It's a 1-minute recharge with 3 charges, each charge lasting normally 3 seconds, but because of Subterfuge, it's now 5. Now, Shadow Dance basically allows you to get all benefits of stealth. So that also accounts for Soothe in Darkness and Master of Subtlety. So you basically enter into this stealth aura without actually being stealth. The problem with that though is you have two bars. You have your stealth bar and your non-stealth bar. Basically, when you use Shadow Dance, it doesn't give you a stealth bar. It keeps you on your normal bar. So make sure to have all stealth and non-stealth based abilities available whether you're in stealth or not when you use Shadow Dance. Also, Shadow Dance, you can reduce the cooldown of Shadow Dance every time you use finishers. I'm not really sure exactly what is the cooldown. Actually, no, we're gonna test this. Alright, so 58 seconds on Shadow Dance available. Let me get some 5 combo points on the train dummy and eviscerate the target. So 50. We cut it down by 15 seconds. So 5 combo points is 15 seconds. So the more finishers you use for Shadow Dance, the faster you can get the recharges. So that is something for you to remember. We still have Shadow Step. It's now a 30-second cooldown, but Subtlety has the insane amount of mobility now. Probably the best mobility in the game that I've ever seen. Shadow Strike replaces Ambush, and just it's so much easier for everybody to be explained this. Shadow Strike replaces Ambush. So just whenever you think of Ambush or think of Shadow Strike, just think Ambush. Shadow Strike, 40 energy, 25-yard range. Very interesting. Strikes through shadows appearing behind the target and dealing 31k worth of physical damage. So, mobility is a big suit for Subtlety Rogue. You can move around the battlefield when you use Shadow Strikes, and you can use it in order to use enemy's position in order to gain advantage for yourself, in order to be able to move to the area where the enemy is at. So enemy is far away, You don't want to move over. You want to get to the healer? You can using Shadow Strike. It costs 40 energy, but deals great damage in terms of sustain. That is going to be the ability you'll be spamming and moves you around the battlefield. So maybe you can use like, oh, I offensively get to the enemy. Oh, I need to back up. I'm going to get friendly's location and Shadow Step to them. So a ton of mobility for Subtlety, basically. Shuriken Storm, really cool ability, but it is a bit of a nerf compared to what they had with Phantom Knives. Phantom Knives would generate a combo point for every target hit. That counts pets. Shuriken Storm still generates a combo point for every target hit, minus the pets. So pets and totems and all those other things on the side don't no longer generate an extra combo point. It has to be players. So when you're using Shuriken Storm, has to be players. Also, don't worry about the damage increase by 200 while in stealth or shadow dance active. It is not that high of damage increase, although it is kind of fun when you spin the flags and you're hitting everybody equally for 15k. Shuriken Toss is now an just a basic ability for Subtlety rogues. I generally don't want to spam it. For the most part, you use Shuriken Toss only if you really need to kill somebody who's far away from you can't get to them, like if you're rooted, or you need those combo points at range. For the most part, I like to use this ability and wait for my energy to pull back up to full or close to full, and then use it. I don't spam this ability, I use it very sparingly. Symbols of Death replaces your Slice and Dice. Actually, I had a second to just remember Slice and Dice because I haven't seen it in forever. Subtlety rogues are just like, no Slice and Dice, no Phantom Knives, no Ambush. This is wrong. Symbols of Death can only be used in stealth. It invokes the ancient symbols of power, increasing all damage dealt by 20% for 35 seconds, causing the next Shadow Strike to critical strike unaffected by global cooldown, 10-second cooldown. So generally, you would want to use it before an opener, right? You open it on target, you Shadow Strike to them, you throw your dot, and oh, everything is good. But let's say you want to deal a little bit more damage. You know that Symbols of Death grants your Shadow Strike 100% crit, so you would Shadow Dance, Symbols of Death, throw that cheeky in there, and then get those Shadow Strikes in there. So the next Shadow Strike will be a crit. So eventually, when you're bursting somebody and when you're using Shadow Dance, as you're running around the battlefield, you'll want to sneak in those Symbols of Death in there. It is 35 energy, and to have 35 energy of Symbols of Death followed by Shadow Strike 40 energy, that's about 70 energy to begin with. So having good energy management is definitely helpful for a Subtlety rogue. You will want to use this ability, Symbols of Death, to throw in there from time to time, but you will want to have to watch for your energy to make sure you're not just spending it through and you're not energy starving yourself. But it is a very cool mechanic, as you can use it in midst of battle to get that 100% crit. And you still have Vanish, Tricks of Trade you can't use. Shadowy Techniques is an interesting ability. You guys remember Honor Among Thieves, where crits from your abilities or friendly's abilities generate a combo point every 2 seconds? Shadow Techniques now is different. It now works off your auto attacks. Auto attacks have a chance to generate a combo point. So as you're standing there auto attacking the train dummy, all of your attacks have a chance to generate an extra combo point once in a while. So Subtlety rogues have been playing like very sparingly, very much energy pooling. You'll still want to be able to do, you'll still want to do that, and you'll still be rewarded for just not spamming energy because you have a chance to just generate extra combo points overall. So still will have, that's like the only thing that stayed for Subtlety. All the other things basically changed. In terms of CC, which is the next thing I would want to say, is you lost Garrote as Subtlety. You still have your stuns, so you still have the way to line up damage on the enemy, but you lost Garrote, but you gained a lot of mobility. So I think that's really it that I can cover in terms of like all the changes that the spec went through. I mean, there's a lot of changes, and definitely you gotta play it to gauge for the teleportation style gameplay, but that's basically all the changes that you would need to know. Now, in terms of how you play Subtlety, it's kind of very simple. We'll start as simple. You want to maintain Symbols of Death. Check. Every time you use Symbols of Death, you get Shadow Strike. So throw it on, even if you don't need Symbols of Death. It's good to have it up. So maintain Symbols of Death. Make sure to get a stun, 5 combo points. Get a Nightblade on an enemy. Check. Nightblade on an enemy is taking damage. Symbols of Death, all damage is increased by 20%. What do you do from there? You basically just want to stun lock the enemy and then burst him down with Shadow Strikes. Should you ever use backstabs? As a Subtlety rogue, you would think maybe like, yeah, after you open an enemy, stun him, Nightblade, Shadow Strike, maybe Eviscerate. You don't really want to use Shadow Dance. Should you ever backstab? As a Subtlety rogue, I almost never backstab. It is the worst ability. It has such a poor energy management to it. Deals basically no damage. I'd never use it unless I'm full on energy and I'm not waiting to use Shadow Dance. Most of the Subtlety gameplay is going to be, you want to use Shadow Dance, Symbols of Death, just throw it in there, Shadow Strike, Shadow Strike. Eviscerate when you don't need to refresh dot. Shadow Strike, I'm kind of waiting for energy again. Throw in a backstab, get a Nightblade on the enemy. So it's very simple to what Subtlety has been. Maintain 1 dot on the enemy, which is Nightblade. Maintain buff on yourself, Symbols of Death. And from there, you basically want to spam Ambush, which normally as a Subtlety rogue, you don't really spam Ambush that often because you didn't have access to stealth as often. You had access to it once in a while. But you Eviscerate simply don't deal enough damage. So usually we get damage from DFAs, getting a big chunk of damage out of the enemy. Now you'll want to use Ambush or Shadow Strike a lot more often. So basic like opener will be Cheap Shot, Shadow Strike, Nightblade, Shadow Dance, Cheap Shot, maybe another Shadow Strike, Eviscerate, throw Symbols of Death in there, and Shadow Strike for crit. Just kind of hanging out, chilling, maybe swap to another target, throw a Nightblade onto them. Just hanging out, pulling your energy. You want to deal some damage, Shadow Dance, Shadow Strike, Symbols, Shadow Strike, Kidney. More damage coming out, Shadow Strike, Eviscerate, Shadow Strike, and maybe another Eviscerate. So it's basically similar gameplay of what Subtlety has been for the longest time. Except now you have a lot more uses of Shadow Dance, a lot more control with it, and a lot more mobility, and you're spamming a lot more abilities. You're really just throwing as many abilities into your enemy as possible. So Subtlety Rogue is actually just a lot of fun. The gameplay offers a lot more control. You want to go for burst? You're very much able to. You want to stun lock your enemy? Very much able to. You want to move around the battlefield? Whenever you want to. You want to let up a short burst to maybe force a trinket out of the enemy, but without wasting all of your cooldowns? You can do so with a Shadow Dance. Stun lock him, hit him with a Shadow Strike, Nightblade, then Cheap Shot him again, Shadow Strike again, Eviscerate, and you're dealing a chunk of damage on the enemy. The way you would burst with Shadow Blades is really up to you. You just apply it, and what I like to do sometimes in BGs, since you can get like faster cooldown reduction on your Shadow Dance for example, is Shadow Blades. Then I'm gonna go around and Shadow Strike in enemies, maybe twice, while using Shadow Dance. And I'm gonna put my dots on everybody because those dots deal a lot of damage. Every time you use a finisher, you also refresh Shadow Dance cooldown, and I mean the recharge rate. And now you have a bunch of targets dotted up, also moving slowly as long as you're hitting them post Nightblade. So it's a way of like spread pressure, but that's just one of the ways of using it. You can always just like sink as many Shadow Strikes into enemy and then eviscerate them as much as possible. Also can work on healers and all the other classes. That's just some of the things that I like to do like in BGs. It ends up dealing a lot of damage. I think this is everything I can cover for Subtlety Rogues. One thing, your defensives. You still have Cloak, you still have Evasion, works the same way as it used to. You still have Blind, you no longer have Gouge, that kind of sucks. You have Kick, you have Sap, and that's everything. That's now that's everything. And there's gonna be a lot more once you get your artifact weapon and PvP talents, because there's just a lot of cool things on the board, but can't access them until we're level 110. So I'll come back and make an actual guide. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and hopefully you found this video useful, and hopefully it was as descriptive as possible. The only thing I can say is watch some other Subtlety Rogues play, just watch what abilities they use and how they use them, and also come back to my channel, hit subscribe, because I'll be putting out more Subtlety Rogue BGs and gameplay overall, and talking a lot about Subtlety. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. My name is Dalaran, and if you want me to do Assassination Rogue guide, let me know in the comments. If we can get enough of an audience that wants to see Assassination, then I can go over Assass. Make a guide, or this pre-patch kind of guide, just like this one. Thank you guys again. I'll see you in the next video.